to me, I think a convert naturally tells people. The first thing I did was tell people. Yeah, that's a natural flow of a conversion. You can pray, read your Bible, and witness and tell people about Jesus. If you do right, you can expect the right answers, the right life. You make decisions to live right, to live pure, to live clean, to keep Jesus, in the center of your. I mean, we used to talk. She said, if you backslide, I ain't backsliding. I used to tell her the same thing. If you backslide, I ain't backsliding for you. You do what you got to do, but we both serve Jesus. She's not serving Jesus because of me, and I'm not serving Jesus because of her. We both serve Jesus because of who he is. And that's how any relationship that goes into that arena should be about.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Light It Up podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Taylor. With us, we have Rafael Alvarez.
What's up, y'all?
And our guest, Evangelist Mike Gomez.
Hello.
If you have not heard the beginning of his incredible testimony, make sure you go back and watch last week's episode, then come back to this, because last week he explained the process and his story of how he got saved, what he was going through before he went saved, and talked about his incredible experience when he first got saved. And now we're going to get into his church life, what happened, some of the things he did, some of the boundaries he set, as he talked very little about in the last episode. We're delving into that. So we hope you guys enjoy. Pastor, why don't you?
Okay, well, there's a lot to be said. So like I finished off last week, I said we started living for God. So one of the things that I kind of settled in my heart is that, I felt that God had actually honored my prayer when I walked out of that bar that night. I said, Lord, you bring me a woman, I'll settle down. So I thought, it's not a coincidence, this other broken person who's looking for answers. We come together, we end up both getting saved on the same day. We both make good decisions in that first, we got baptized on the same day, And so, which is another factor to my testimony. I thought I was going to be dead when I was 27 or 25, right?
Yeah.
So I'm 24 when I get saved. I got baptized the day before my 25th birthday. So
wow.
The old man really did die when I was 25.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's kind of a trip. So anyway, so we were living for God, reading our Bibles. I now live in a different place. She lives in a different place. And so I had purpose in my heart that this is going to be the woman that I'm going to marry. And so there are, other girls, sisters in the church, that probably, wanted a husband that was serving God. And, I was doing my best to do that. I very quickly got into the discipleship mode. Matter of fact, I was following up on people within 3 months.
I bet they were,
people. Yeah. I remember going with somebody to follow up on somebody. Excuse me. And the brother told me, goes, the guy that I actually prayed with at the altar, he said, we're going to go follow up on something. Oh, that's all right, cool. I go, well, what if I need to follow up? And he just looked at me and goes, you already got it, man. I go, whatever. I don't know what I got, but, I never missed a church service, I was in everything that, that they had going on. I'd even show up to the band practice. We had a rock and roll band. I'd show up just to cheer them on. When I wasn't invited, I just show up. Hey, man, go. Because I just want to be in church. And so I began to, like I said, I would read my Bible. That was my biggest thing. Living with a guy, we got an apartment together. And before I even knew there was a prayer meeting. So this is in the early 80s or late 80s, I should say. And I'm working construction. Where I worked was, I was working on the 105 freeway here, Southern California, helping building that freeway. And so it was about an hour and a 20-minute, hour and a half drive with no traffic. So I would leave, my house by 5. And so I would get up, at 4 and pray. My friend told me, he goes, man, I can't believe you do that. Because, work construction is hard work. And then you're, got a long day and then you come back, it was pretty tiring. But I didn't want to start my day without prayer. And that was just something I just did on my own. I didn't, it wasn't a long prayer. It might have been 10 minutes, maybe. I can't even remember, but I made a point of every day getting up to pray because I didn't see, I didn't feel right praying in the car. To me, I'm more driving than I am praying. So I would get up early just to make time to pray. And so that became a part of my life since, I've been praying since morning prayer since 35 years of my salvation, pretty much. And so then, I made a commitment to read the Word of God before any other books. At that time, there was a lot of hunger for spiritual things, and guys are passing around books. And I said, no, I'm not going to read anything. So I'm going to read this Bible. So I read it cover to cover. I think almost two times before I actually picked up a book. And then I started picking up other books, and it really stirred my hunger in my heart for other things. But I have read my Bible through every year since I got saved. Okay. Cover to cover.
Wow.
But probably the last 15 years was not enough. So now I read it twice a year, cover to cover.
Wow. Really? Jeez.
Yeah, I'll be done. I'll be done with my second second time Friday.
Wow.
This Friday I'll be done reading it through, and I'm not going to break or anything. I'll just change translations and start another year.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, every year you change the translation.
Yeah, I read different translations just because I like to change it up.
Yeah.
I've got about 5 or 6 translations, or 4 or 5 translations that I read regularly. That's just my preference. And so that's part of my, to me, that's part of being a Christian, right? Yeah, and I'm not going, it's just being a preacher. Christians, I thought, should pray and read their Bible and go to church. It sounds redundant, sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how many people don't pray, don't read their Bible, and have a hard time going to church. But those are things that I committed to do from my early days. I'm gonna read my Bible, I'm gonna pray, and I'm gonna go to a church. And so I've been doing that, my whole salvation. So it's not just something I do because I'm a preacher. It's something I do because what Jesus did in my life. And so it helps maintain my relationship with God. Keeps it fresh, keeps it current, keeps it real. It would be terrible for me, as a Christian, and now someone who stands behind a pulpit, to read my Bible once in a while or just for sermons. I don't do that. I get inspiration for sermons while I read my Bible, but I study my Bible. I actually, I don't want to sound like overkill, but I have a program that I read, a daily Bible plan, and I switch it from time to time. But that's just my devotional reading. I also have a study Bible that I take with me to prayer. After I read my Bible in the morning, I take my study Bible with me, and sometimes I'll go through a chapter, maybe 2 chapters, and I'll just chew on every little note, cross-reference, and because that's when I'm kind of digging into certain things. That's just me. I don't say that's what everybody does. That's just what I do.
And that surely helps you in, creating sermons and witnessing to people. You have.
Yeah. Well, now that you mentioned witnessing, you see, to me, I think a convert naturally tells people. The first thing I did was tell people.
Yeah.
I went to the day after I got saved. I was at a guy I used to deal drugs with. I had no saved friends, right, other than my girlfriend. So I went over to this guy's house. The first thing he does is he offers me a joint. Like, nah, dude, I'm good. And he offers me a line of speed. I said, nah. Then he offered me a beer. So I took the beer and I drank the beer. Drank about half of it. And about halfway through, I'm like, it didn't even taste the same. I'm like, nah, I just kind of left it there. And so then he's asking me, like, what's up, man? I said, but I gave my life to Jesus last night. I don't need that stuff no more. He's like, then he got all religious on me. He said he was a Catholic. I said, I never heard you talk about no Catholic. Nothing.
Wow.
You've been dealing drugs with as long as I've known you. Doing drugs and dealing drugs, and all of a sudden you're going to say you're Catholic. I said, yeah, you're full of beans, dude. What is this? I gave my witness and told him about Jesus, and I would, I would always, a friend of mine, the guy that I lived with when I first got saved, he and I, when we didn't have an outreach, a planned outreach, a scheduled outreach on the weekend because we lived together, when we were bored, we'd go do something. He said, we'd walk down to the corner. There was a Arco AMPM gas station, and we'd go there, and he'd, get on one island, and I'd get on the other island. We witnessed to people while they're pumping their gas. Say, man, if this gas station blows up, man, where are you gonna go? I know where I'm going. People look at us like we're crazy, but we just want to tell people. We go street preaching, all the time. Looking for something to do. Always trying to, everybody was a candidate to talk to. I used to pick people up that were hitchhiking. Hey, jump in my truck, man. You guys hear about Jesus? I just started witnessing to him. But that was just me. To me, that's a natural flow of a conversion. You can pray, read your Bible, and witness and tell people about Jesus. And so I almost, and I know I've pastored 2 churches. I've been evangelizing, I don't know, 14 years. I can't remember. But, I know there's some people that wrestle with those things. That, they really don't have a hard time breaking the ice with people. They feel like, especially young people, sometimes they don't feel, adequate because they don't know everything, or they don't have those experiences, and they don't know. My daughter, was a good example. One of my daughters, I won't mention her name, but she's now married. But one time she came to me, she goes, Dad, I don't know what to say, because girls would open up to her. They were drawn to her. I don't know if it's because of her innocence. I don't know. But they start opening up their hearts to her. And she's, I don't know what to say to these people, Dad. She goes, I've never done drugs. I've never slept around. I've never cussed. Never watched these movies they talk about. I don't know what they're, she goes, I don't have a broken home. So I can't relate to any of them. I says, wait a minute. I says, don't even go there. I says, your testimony carries a lot of weight. And I told him, and I tell all young people, I says, if you're living for God and you haven't, sampled sin or been ruined by sin, that's an even more powerful testimony. Because what it is saying is that even in my goodness, going to church, having good family, good mom, dad, all that, you still needed Jesus. I said, so you have every right to tell people that they need Jesus, because it carries more weight because of your innocence, because of your purity. And so that kind of set the record straight for her and all my other daughters. I got 5 daughters, and so they're all doing quite well. They're all saved. You might have ran into a couple of them at boot camp.
Yes. One of them was in my platoon.
Yeah, so they're all doing good. I always encourage them. It says you don't have this raggedy, tore up life to be a witness for Jesus. You don't have to have a testimony like some people think. Mind-boggling to me how some people want to go out and backslide and be stupid for whatever and think, oh, I got to go have this so I can testify. Well, who says you're going to have a second chance? Who
Right.
says they might use your first chance to take you out? So, and then
I was going to say continue with that.
Yeah, so I started developing. I remember going over to my pastor's house for a fellowship, and then I noticed all his books. Okay, he had tons of books, and I'm like, this man reads a lot. I was never a reader. I was never good in school. I never paid attention in school, but it kind of sparked something in me. I said, man, if he reads, I should probably read. And so I started buying books. And I remember, some of my friends would, kind of joke with me because I bought books on theology, books on God, names of God, different doctrinal issues, and I actually worked out a lot of doctrinal issues before I ever got launched out or ever got sent out. I had a full grasp of understanding Jesus was a healer, baptism of the Holy Ghost, the Trinity, Calvinism, just different things. I had made those things my own. I didn't regurgitate what somebody else said. Well, I say this, so I believe it because my pastor said. He said it, but I went and dug it up and made it my own revelation. I know what I'm saying because I've read it, studied it, found scriptures to back up what I said. I'm not just regurgitating somebody else's words. I believe it because it's true, and I know it's true, and so that was just. I just didn't want to be ignorant. not knowing answers to questions, and if I didn't know, I'd go find out. And so I did a lot of that as a disciple, just reading and study and, trying to keep my inner man, built up. It's kind of disappointing, sometimes. I took a bunch of books a few years ago to our church and tried to hand them out, or, sell them. I was going to use them for a fundraiser, and I was a little shocked that nobody wanted any of the books that I had. The only person that bought books was my pastor, and I thought, wow, these guys ain't hungry for things, or maybe they already know everything. I don't know. I didn't know everything when I was a disciple. But, you hear, somebody brings a bunch of books that could help them, and nobody wanted any. So I said, okay, well, I'm not going to bring no more books. I'll just keep that to myself. Because, if you read, one of the greatest quotes I ever heard as a young disciple was at a discipleship class here in California. And it was a quote of Charles Spurgeon. He says, a man who reads is read, a man who quotes is quoted, a man who uses no other man's brain shows he has no brains for himself. I heard that quote 35 years ago.
Wow.
I said, man, I'm going to use my brains. I'm going to use somebody else's brains because there's more people got to figure it out more than I do. So I read. I got an extensive library. I've read, about all kinds of things that fascinate me, that, draw my attention. So I think the will of God is played out because of reading. Keeps me full. What
do you mean by that? The will of God playing out because you've been reading?
Well, if you know anything about the Apostle Paul, he's reaching out to Timothy in one of his letters, and he says, "Bring to me, the parchments, which is the scriptures that were written on scrolls, and the books." So Paul, here's a man, he's got revelation, great revelation. He wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. One is he prayed in tongues more than anybody else, but he was a reader. He read. He was eloquent. He was able to communicate. He would use what was going on in the world to witness to people. When he was at the archipelago there in Greece, and he noticed that they were worshiping the unknown God, he took advantage of what they said and what they read, and he used it to witness to them, to share the gospel with them. So if you aren't reading, things that, not just that interest you, but things that, are like current events, reading news, something, that getting your, like I was in the witnessing to some folks on Saturday. And one of the things I says, do you guys know what's going on in the world? I brought up that, Israel had just started their war. I says, are you aware what's going on? And a lot of people are like, no. And then those that did, I began to expound on stuff that I know about Bible prophecy, and it was a conversation starter, but it's because I read and I pay attention to what's going on in the world. I don't just, I'm not as interested in sports as I used to be. One is I'm older now, I'm 60 years old. And so, been there and done that. Okay. Who cares? There are people that need to be saved. That's more important, in my opinion.
Right.
I'm sticking to it. So,
hey, I got a question. So like you said, you weren't like growing up when you first got into church and all that, you didn't really like reading and all that. What advice would you give to someone to a disciple who wants to get into reading and all that, but they can't like get into it basically, like they hate reading?
Okay, it's like anything else. It's like, like an instrument, or it's like any hobby you might have. You got to start somewhere, And so I would suggest that they ask their pastor, "Pastor, you got any books I should read?" You think, and most pastors, he might even give you some books. Hey, read this one, But you have to have a little bit of an appetite. And me, I've made myself finish books that I thought were boring. I got through it and I drudged through it, but I made myself finish it because I've over the years of doing this, I've disciplined myself to make myself read it and finish it. And another thing that helped me is I learned how to preach by taking notes in church, writing with a pencil, paper, pen and paper. I have books, countless notebooks of me taking notes, conferences, discipleship classes, my pastor, Sunday school. I learned how to preach. My wife used to tell me, why you put all these little, ones and twos in your sermon, you know, when you're listening, because that's how I hear sermons. I hear the points in a sermon. I hear the sub points and I write them. That's how I learn how to preach. You know, nobody taught me how to put a sermon together. Say you need to do this, this, that. I learned by taking notes. And then now in my books, I take notes in my books. I'll highlight my books. I'll write a page, like a little 3x5 card or 5x7 card. I'll jot down, you know, little notes on that book, you know, and I'll highlight it and I'll write on that index card where it is, what page 56. There's good thought on this, good quote. I've got a lot of books that are filled with index cards. So I can just go to them. Instead of looking for that quote, I can go to my index card and say, oh, yeah. But that's a discipline that I learned. You know, so ask your pastor, you know, about books, and I'm sure he'll put some in your hands.
So, Pastor, why don't we go back a little? And you mentioned after you got saved, you and your girlfriend had kind of separated and not kind of broke off from each other, stopped hanging around as much. And then you mentioned about a year later, you guys started courting. So what's that about?
Oh, courting. Well, courting is where you actually got your mind that, you know, you're going to, the end of this courtship should be for marriage. And, you know, in my opinion, you're not going to court this person and go court that person and date this person. You know, that because there are emotional connections that are made and those kind of things. People should be friends in the church. They should be friends first. There shouldn't be this, you know, well, I like her, she likes me, blah, blah, blah. Courting is the development of a relationship that's going to eventually lead to marriage. And hopefully it flows in that direction. So when I said I started courting her, no longer it was more like, we're going to talk about things, you know. I knew I was called to preach. Okay. And I would bring that up. I said, hey, you know, are you on the same page with me? Yeah, I'm on the same page. You know, we'll begin to set little, you know, goals that, you know, we might have where we want to be financially responsible in these areas. Maybe we have to cut some corners in these areas. And are you willing to do that? Yeah, I'm willing to do that. And so courtship is kind of getting to know each other at a more intimate level, you know, about your plans and desires. And that's where the things should be hashed out in that arena while you're dating into courtship, you know, that I want to serve God in this capacity. I feel God's calling me to this. What do you think? You know, because if you're dating somebody just because they're, you know, pretty, you know, well, Proverbs says beauty is passing. You know, my wife's 55. She's still beautiful to me, but you know, we all get older. And so, you know, you're not, you know, that's not the issue. The issue is maintaining a friendship over the long haul. And you two can't be friends for the long haul unless they agree. Okay. Unless they are in it together. And so we started then, you know, a relationship prior to salvation was built on selfishness, right? You know, for me, it was sex. For her, it was probably just to have somebody that's there to provide some kind of protection against some guy that might come and beat her up, you know, and she was lonely. I was lonely. Jesus comes in. Now, you know, that's changed everything. You know, that's why we separated. So we can fix our eyes on Jesus. She needed to develop a relationship with Jesus. I needed to develop a relationship with Jesus. And then as we started to court, it was centered on Jesus and what he was doing in our lives and where we're going to go with this. Eventually, you know, we would never go on dates by ourselves. We always went with somebody. We held ourselves accountable. You know, wouldn't be out late at night. You know, wouldn't spend hours just talking on the phone. You know, matter of fact, back then we didn't even have cell phones. You know, you had a hardline phone. You know, and so, you know, we just held ourselves accountable in such a way. You know,
and looking back, how do you think that affected or helped you rather?
Well, I think what I tell people is right always comes out right. You know, you can't do wrong and expect right. But if you do right, you can expect the right answers, the right life. You know, You make decisions to live right, to live pure, to live clean, to keep Jesus, in the center of your. I mean, we used to talk. She said, if you backslide, I ain't backsliding. I used to tell her the same thing. If you backslide, I ain't backsliding for you. You do what you got to do, but we both serve Jesus. She's not serving Jesus because of me, and I'm not serving Jesus because of her. We both serve Jesus because of who he is. And that's how any relationship that goes into that arena should be about. Jesus has got to be the center of it.
Now you had a lot of, or you were a very violent person, as you were mentioning last episode, and you had a lot of rejection. So, how did God work on that in your life, and how did that change?
Well, there were sermons over the period of sermons that you hear, God dealing with your heart. I've actually preached a sermon that was developed over time, me learning about me, in the issues of my own brokenness and how because sometimes you don't see a lot of things in the early stages of your Christianity. You don't see the end. You don't even see the middle. You just see right now. But after serving God and being, in ministry for a while, I look back and I can see areas of my life that were changed and areas of my life that needed to be changed because of certain, things that took place in my life, the rejection, things like that, So I learned how to navigate through those things, like I used to be the kind of person that would, when I was upset with something or someone, I would shut down. Okay. And I just didn't tell people. I just hold it in, because I was a ticking time bomb, basically. I'm just like, well, I'm not going to say anything. Because if I say anything, I'm going to follow up with, some issues that might not be good. So I'll just keep my mouth shut. Excuse me. And so I'd rather just not say anything than run my mouth. And so, but being married really helped me because, we lived together, so there was a little conflict in the early stage of our marriage. Me shutting down didn't work. I couldn't just suppress that. I had to work through some issues in my heart, work through some issues, and same thing with my wife. We both had, we're both broken people, got fixed. We didn't come from a perfect background. So God is developing us and changing us and helping us over the the process of our salvation. And so I can look back now and I can sound like, hey, I know a lot now, but hey, this has been 35 years in the making, a lot of these things, 20 years in the making. Some of the things that I see now has because of a process of staying saved and living for God for this long, to have the victory, to have understanding, to have some wisdom about situations. It came with time. Some people they're too lazy to wait. They want the quick fix. They want the quick answer. I want just tell me a book to buy or a prayer to pray, and that's it. But some things come over time. And I've learned that. That I can tell. I'm able to minister at the boot camp at certain levels to young people because of things I experienced as a young person. I can see it. I can spot it very easily now. I can see the young man who's hurting, who's been rejected, and he's got violence in his life, and I can spot him a mile away. So that kid's like me when I was that age. And I can walk up and start talking to him because of where I've been, where I've come from. And so that's just, like I said, it comes over time. So it's helped me to bring some healing and some ministry to other people because of the process I've been through, and hopefully help them make some, cut some corners for them so they don't have to wait so long. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Now, before we kind of wrap up, I want to hear what happened between you and your dad. You've mentioned before that you guys reconciled, but what happened?
Well, yeah, you heard we reconciled. Well, after I got married, he came back around. After I got saved, he came back around. And so then, it was talking to him is kind of strange because come to find out, he gave me his testimony. My dad got saved in prison. Okay, my dad, and then as he was sharing his testimony, I was like kind of blown away because I realized I was a lot like my dad, because he was violent, and he was drugs. So as he's talking, I'm like, wow, this is kind of strange. I didn't understand generational curses back then as a new convert. I learned what it was by living through some things and seeing some healing different. So my dad came around. I wasn't mean to him the second time. I didn't harbor this. I'm saved. I love God. And so, but I couldn't call him dad. It was weird to me because he'd never been my dad. So because he's a Christian, I was in conversation with my dad calling him bro. Hey, bro, brother. Because it was awkward for me to call him, hey, dad, I'd never called him dad or pop or anything, And so, then he came, he dropped by, once in a while, but I told him anytime you want to come over, there's no problem. I had forgiven him. I said I forgave him, but we actually had a very powerful reconciliation a couple of years later where he came to visit. I actually said, hey, I want you to forgive me for my bitterness and my rage and my hate and my anger, because I told him, I said, I wanted to kill you. And so, and then he, it got really completely healed. And so, we weren't, still close, but there was no bitterness. There was no, hey, whatever, I didn't hold him to a certain standard. Oh, you got to come visit me. You got to say, catch up on the birthdays. Not like that. When you call, I'm just going to, hey, man, good to hear from you. How you doing? He has two other sons. They're 20-some years younger than I am. 25 years younger than me. I don't mind talking to him. But there's no animosity. My dad passed away a couple of years ago. I was scheduled to go visit him because he lived on the res there. He was about an hour from Chinle. And so I was preaching in Arizona close by in Winslow. And I say, hey, I made arrangements to go visit him. He says, yeah, but I got COVID. He said, but I should be, over with it by the time you get here. So, okay. So I was going to go visit him on a Tuesday. Before I got there, I got a text from my half brother that said, hey, man, they flew dad out to Flagstaff because there were a lot of natives that were dying, and obviously that I'm native, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of natives are dying on the res, and so I said, okay, well, keep me posted. And so, my brother told, I didn't get to see him, so I didn't get to visit him because he actually passed. But my half brother told me, he says, yeah, because I went in there and asked him, Dad, you okay? Everything's fine? And he goes, yeah. And he tapped his chest. I'm ready. I'm ready to see Jesus. And he said, you want me to bring your Bible? He says, no, I got the Bible in here. So my dad was saved. My dad used to evangelize, on all the reservations. That's what he did. He had a burden for other natives. So he would go around to different tribes and different reservations and basically share his testimony, how God changed him, and try to convince. He told me one time, it was probably about 5 years ago, when he first started witnessing to people on the res, he says 1 in 10 would listen to him. And there was closed people, He said, but now, he says, it's like 1 in 10 won't listen to us. There was an openness. There's been a change in the 25, 30 years that he'd been witnessing people. Obviously, we have churches on reservations now, and he had heard about our church there in Chinle. That's our Artie's church. But he never attended because, like I said, he was always traveling other places, talking to other people. That was his burden that he always got. But he'd call me from time to time and say, we're all good. And so it was a miracle, that God can reconcile and heal that after all those years. And, and so
right.
It's hope for anybody. God's able to heal broken relationships.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on, Evangelist Mike Gomez. We've had an amazing time, incredible story, which we can all apply everything we've heard to our own personal lives. Make sure you guys follow us on Instagram, Spotify, Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Like, share, let your friends know his story and the miracle, the absolute miracle that is his life. And make sure you tune in next week. We'll have a new guest, a new story, and we'll see you guys then.
Yeah. Don't forget I'm a drill instructor.
Yes.
I was gonna ask.